They swore they loved me. They smiled in my face, shared my table, and called me family. But behind my back, they were plotting the cruelest betrayal I could ever imagine, one that stripped me of trust, dignity, and almost everything I had worked for. I thought loyalty meant something. I thought blood meant protection. I was wrong. Because when the truth finally came crashing down, I realized I wasn't just their victim, I was their target. And if I didn't fight back, I'd lose more than just what was stolen. I'd lose myself. So I did the unthinkable. And when the tables turned, they never saw it coming. But here's the question, would you have done what I did? My name is Aisha, and for as long as I can remember, my world has revolved around my family. We weren't rich, but we weren't starving either. My father owned a small piece of land left behind by his parents, and my mother, though strict, was the kind of woman who never let anyone forget the value of family honor. Growing up, I believed I was blessed. While other children dreamed of escaping their homes, I found comfort in mine. I was the daughter who never rebelled, never asked for more than what was given, and never thought my parents could ever wish me harm. If anything, I lived for them. My younger years were filled with sacrifices that I never even thought twice about, giving up higher education so I could work early and contribute to the household, skipping small luxuries so my parents could have what they wanted, staying home to care for them when others were chasing their own dreams. I thought this was love. I thought this was loyalty. And in my heart, I believed it would all come back to me one day, if not in money, then in affection, blessings, and pride. But as I would later discover, love can sometimes be the cruelest disguise for greed. When I turned 18, many of my friends began moving away for studies or marriages, but I stayed behind. My parents often reminded me, Aisha, a daughter's place is with her family until she marries. And even then, she should remember where she came from. I took those words to heart. I worked part-time jobs, eventually securing a stable office position that gave me enough to support not just myself but them as well. Every paycheck that came in, I handed over most of it to my mother. She would count it, smile, and say, "God give you more honor, my daughter." And I would beam, thinking I was making her proud. What I didn't notice then was how quickly those blessings turned into expectations. What began as gratitude shifted into entitlement. My father would scold me if I spent on myself. My mother would complain if I ever hinted at saving. Slowly, my identity stopped being Aisha, the daughter, and became Aisha, the provider. But I didn't complain. Deep inside, I still believed this was my duty as a daughter. I thought, one day, when the time came, my parents would recognize all my sacrifices. Surely, when property, inheritance, and family assets were discussed, they would remember me as the one who stayed, who gave, who never abandoned them. How wrong I was. One of the biggest shadows in my life was my brother, Imran. Unlike me, he had always been the free bird. He barely worked, constantly asked for money, and treated my parents more like his personal servants than guardians. And yet, my parents adored him. "He is a boy," my father would say whenever I complained. "He has more right on our house than you. You will get married and leave tomorrow. But this house belongs to Imran." I used to brush it off. I told myself it was cultural bias, that sons were always favored, but deep inside I believed love was stronger than tradition. I thought my parents saw me not as a temporary member of their home but as their backbone. And to be fair, sometimes they acted like it. My mother would cry on my shoulder when bills piled up. My father would boast to relatives about how Aisha is the one who holds this house together. Those words filled me with pride. But they were only words. And words, I would soon learn, are easily twisted into lies. It was a winter evening when I first noticed something strange. My father had just come back from the bank, and he seemed oddly cheerful. I was cooking dinner when I overheard him whispering to my mother in the next room. "All the papers are ready. Now just have to get them signed." I froze. Signatures? Papers? I brushed it off at first, assuming it was something routine. Maybe related to the land, or perhaps some bills. But the tone of secrecy lingered in my mind. Why would they whisper? Why not tell me openly, especially when I handled most of the finances anyway? Days turned into weeks, and the whispers grew more frequent. Whenever I entered the room, they would fall silent. Whenever I asked questions, they would laugh it off. One day, my mother said something that stung more than any slap could have. I had suggested that I might want to save for my own small apartment one day. She scoffed, "Do you want your own house? Aisha, your place will always be here. Anyway, for whom will you build the house? After marriage, it will be your husband's." Her words rattled me. Not because of their harshness, but because they revealed a truth I had been avoiding. In their eyes, I wasn't a rightful heir. I was a temporary caretaker. Still, I tried to shake it off. I told myself, they're just old-fashioned. They don't mean harm. After all, these were my parents, the same people I had nursed when they were sick, the same people I had sacrificed friendships and opportunities for. But the signs kept piling up. My father suddenly became obsessed with having me sign documents without explanation. "It's just a routine thing, daughter," he would insist, sliding the papers across the table. "You sign, I'll take care of the rest." At first, I signed without question. But something inside me, a quiet, growing whisper, began to resist. Why were they hiding things from me? Why did my name keep appearing in conversations I wasn't part of? The breaking point came when I visited a cousin, Rania, one afternoon. She looked at me strangely and said, "Aisha, did you hear it? Mamu said that the entire house and land is being transferred to Imran's name. And you have signed it too?" Her words sliced through me. My heart pounded. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Kia?" I whispered. Rania nodded, almost apologetically. "He was saying that you don't need anything. Everything will be Imran's." In that moment, the world around me shattered. All the sacrifices, all the years of loyalty, all the dreams I had buried for them, it had all been for nothing. My parents weren't whispering about protecting me. They were whispering about stripping me of everything. And worst of all, they were using my own trust, my own signatures, as the knife. I went home that night, silent, shaking, my mind replaying Rania's words over and over again. When I entered the house, my mother smiled warmly and asked me to sit for tea. My father joined, his voice unusually cheerful. "Aisha, daughter," he said, sliding another paper toward the pen, "it's just a small formal thing. Sign it." And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I didn't reach for the pen. Instead, I looked into their eyes, searching for answers, and felt a chill run down my spine. Because I knew, deep inside, that the people I trusted most were about to rob me of everything. I sat there, staring at the paper my father slid across the table. The pen lay beside it like a weapon, waiting to be used against me. My hand trembled, but not from confusion anymore. This time, it was from clarity. I didn't pick it up. "Why aren't you signing, my daughter?" my mother asked, her voice soft, almost too soft. For a brief second, her eyes flickered, and I thought I saw something sharp, something calculating, hiding behind her smile. I forced myself to smile back. "I'm just tired. I'll look at it tomorrow." My father's brow tightened, but he quickly masked it with a neutral expression. "Fine," he muttered, folding the paper. But in that tiny pause, that fraction of hesitation, I felt something shift. I wasn't their obedient daughter anymore. I was their obstacle. That night I couldn't sleep. Rania's words replayed in my mind like a curse, "Everything will belong to Imran." My chest felt heavy, my throat tight. How could my own parents do this to me? The people who raised me, who praised me for holding the family together, were secretly erasing me from it. I thought of all the mornings I had woken up before sunrise to prepare breakfast, all the nights I had worked overtime just to help pay off their debts, all the parties and celebrations I had skipped so I could stay home when they needed me. And now, this was my reward? Betrayal. Silent, cold, deliberate betrayal. I wanted to confront them, to scream, to demand the truth. But fear held me back. What if Rania was wrong? What if I accused them and they twisted it against me? My parents had always been masters at turning guilt into duty. They knew how to make me feel like I owed them everything. The next morning, I decided to test them. Dad, those papers, what exactly were they for? He didn't even look up from his tea. Routine matters. You don't need to worry about it. His dismissiveness cut deeper than any insult. My curiosity, my rights, my very existence in this house, it all meant nothing to him. The days that followed were unbearable. The pressure kept intensifying. My father kept sliding papers across the table, pushing them toward me. My mother's tone shifted from gentle persuasion to sharp accusations. "Don't you trust your own parents?" she snapped one evening when I hesitated. "After everything we've done for you, you still doubt us?" Her words stung like acid. For a moment, I almost caved, guilt washing over me like a tidal wave. But then I remembered Rania's trembling voice, her warning about the inheritance. My chest hardened, and I held my ground. "I'm not refusing," I whispered. "I just want to understand what I'm signing." Her eyes narrowed, sharp as a blade. "You've changed, Aisha. You used to trust us without question. Now you treat us like strangers." Strangers. That word lingered in the air long after she stormed out of the room. The house no longer felt like home. My parents grew colder with every passing day. Conversations were reduced to clipped sentences, or worse, silence. But with Imran, it was different. With him, they laughed, joked, doted on him like he was a prince. He basked in their affection while I faded into the shadows of my own family. And Imran himself became bolder. His words grew cruel, laced with venom. "This house is mine, Aisha. You're just a guest here. After my marriage, you'll have to leave anyway." I wanted to slap him, to scream that he was nothing without the sacrifices I had made. But deep down, I knew his arrogance wasn't born from himself. It was nurtured, fed by my parents. The walls of my childhood home began to suffocate me. At night, I locked my bedroom door, pressing my face into my pillow, tears soaking the fabric. But with every tear, suspicion hardened into something stronger. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining it. My family, my own parents, were plotting to steal everything from me. One evening, I overheard voices in the living room. My father's voice, low but firm. "Make her sign. If she doesn't agree, we'll find another way." My mother hissed back, "She's not as naive as before. But don't worry, we'll drown her in guilt. She's our daughter. She won't hold out forever." My chest tightened. They weren't just hiding something, they were strategizing against me. The next day, while tidying the shelves, I noticed a file tucked behind old magazines. My pulse raced as I opened it. Property papers. And there, in neat bold letters, was Imran's name, listed as the sole heir to the house and land. My name was nowhere. My knees buckled. The betrayal wasn't suspicion anymore. It was ink on paper. Cold. Legal. Final. That evening, my father slid another document toward me. "This is the last one, Aisha. Just sign it." I looked at him, the man who had once carried me on his shoulders, who had tucked me in with bedtime stories, who had told me I was his pride. My hands trembled, not with fear this time, but with rage. "What is this?" I asked, my voice louder than I expected. His eyes darkened. "You don't have the right to ask. Just sign it." For a moment, silence thickened the air. My mother's eyes burned into me, her lips pressed tight with fury. Imran smirked from the corner, already celebrating his victory. And in that silence, something inside me snapped. "No," I said firmly, pushing the paper back. "I'm not signing anything." The air turned heavy. My father's face stiffened, my mother gasped, and Imran muttered something under his breath. That was the moment I realized I had declared war. From that day forward, my life became unbearable. My parents stopped speaking to me altogether. Meals were eaten in silence. If I entered the room, they would leave. Imran taunted me openly, calling me selfish, ungrateful, a curse on the family. My mother no longer asked for my salary, she demanded it. "If you want to live here, you'll pay. Otherwise, get out." Each insult chipped away at me. Each cold shoulder burned deeper. But strangely, every act of cruelty also sharpened me. The daughter who had once obeyed without question was gone. In her place stood someone my parents couldn't control. But I was still trapped. I couldn't just walk out. I had poured everything I had into this family, this house. If I left now, I would lose everything. One sleepless night, I whispered into the darkness, "They think I'm weak. They think guilt will break me. But they've forgotten, I've lived my whole life in sacrifice. And I know how to endure." The thought sparked something deep inside me. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn their own greed against them. I started paying attention. I listened when they whispered behind closed doors. I memorized the names of lawyers, the banks they visited, the relatives they contacted. I stopped reacting to their taunts, letting them believe I was broken. But inside, I was stitching together a picture of their scheme. Piece by piece. Step by step. And slowly, painfully, I began to imagine a future where I wasn't their victim. I was their punishment. Weeks later, I went to see Rania again. She looked uneasy as she handed me a folded piece of paper. "Aisha, you need to see this. I found it in your father's study." My hands shook as I unfolded it. It was a draft will. My father's. And there, written in cold, final words, all property and wealth to be transferred solely to my son, Imran. My daughter, Aisha, will receive nothing. Nothing. My throat tightened, my eyes blurred, but in that very moment, grief turned to fire. Any last sliver of doubt shattered. My parents weren't just betraying me. They were erasing me. And that was the night I vowed I wouldn't let them. Aisha folds the draft will, her tears burning into determination. The daughter who once sacrificed everything for her parents now begins to plan in silence. Not for survival, but for revenge. That night, after reading the draft will, I sat in the silence of my room. My hands still trembled, but it wasn't fear anymore, it was rage. Rage that had boiled down into something sharper, colder, more precise. For years, I had been their obedient daughter, the quiet provider, the one who carried their burdens without question. But that Aisha was gone. They had killed her the moment they decided I didn't deserve a place in my own home. Now, it was my turn. I started small. If they were going to erase me with paperwork, I would fight with paperwork. Quietly, I went to the same lawyer they had consulted, a man my cousin's husband knew well. I didn't reveal everything at once. I simply asked. If someone is trying to transfer property unfairly, can the rightful heir stop it? The lawyer looked at me carefully. Depends. Do you have proof? Signatures? Draft wills? I slid the folded draft across his desk, my fingers cold. He read it, his brows lifting. This is only a draft, not registered. If this comes to court, your claim as a daughter is valid. Legally, you cannot be written out completely. Especially since you contributed financially to this house. My heart pounded. So I can fight? He leaned forward. Not just fight, you can win. But only if you gather evidence of manipulation. That was all I needed to hear. At home, I changed nothing on the surface. I still handed over most of my paycheck. I still stayed quiet at the table. I let them believe they had broken me. Imran would smirk and say things like, "Just a little more patience, Aisha. Very soon, it will all be over." I never reacted. I smiled faintly, lowered my gaze, and let him think I was defeated. But behind closed doors, I was gathering bank statements, proof of my financial contributions, copies of documents I had signed without knowing. And slowly, I began recording conversations, tiny slips of their greed that revealed everything. Each night, I tucked the evidence away in a hidden folder, my arsenal growing. The day came when my father announced, "We've taken an appointment with the lawyer. Next week, the documents will be finalized." My mother's face glowed with triumph. Imran leaned back in his chair, smug as ever. I forced myself to nod, pretending ignorance. But inside, a storm raged. This was it, the moment they thought they had won. And I knew it had to be the moment I struck back. On the day of the appointment, I pretended to be cooperative. "I'll come too," I said calmly. My father frowned. "There's no need for you." But I insisted, keeping my tone submissive. "Father, you said I'll need to sign anyway. I just want to see how the process works." He hesitated, then reluctantly agreed. They thought they were bringing me along to trap me. They didn't know I was bringing them along to destroy them. At the lawyer's office, the air was thick with tension. My father pushed papers toward me. "Just sign them." The lawyer, different from the one they normally used, but they didn't know that, looked at me and said, "Are you sure this is in your favor?" My father snapped, "It's just routine." I lifted the pen, and then slowly placed it back on the table. "No," I said firmly. "I will not sign. And I also know that you're trying to erase me from this inheritance." The room went silent. My parents' faces drained of color. Imran's smirk faltered. Before they could react, I pulled out the folder of evidence I had collected. Copies of bank transfers, proof of my earnings going into household expenses, recordings of their whispers. And finally, the draft will. "All of this will go to court," I said, my voice steady. "And there, you'll have to explain why you tried to rob your own daughter of her rightful share." My father slammed his fist on the table. "How dare you speak to us like this?" I met his glare without flinching. "I lost my courage the day I gave you everything and received only betrayal in return. But now, my courage has returned." My mother tried to soften her tone. "Aisha, you're misunderstanding." I cut her off. "No, Mother. I understand perfectly. You saw me as nothing but an ATM. A daughter meant only to give, never to ask what was hers by right." For the first time, their masks cracked. And in that crack, I saw panic. True to my word, I filed a case. The weeks that followed were a blur of hearings, statements, and confrontations. My parents stood on one side with Imran, their lawyer painting me as the ungrateful daughter. But I stood firm, my lawyer presenting every shred of evidence. The recordings of their whispers. The documents they tried to hide. Proof of my financial sacrifices. Each piece was like a dagger, cutting through their lies. And with each revelation, their confidence wavered. Relatives who once called me foolish now began whispering in corridors, shaking their heads at my parents' greed. The community, the very people my mother prided herself on impressing, began questioning their honor. And I felt stronger than ever. The verdict came on a rainy afternoon. The judge's words echoed in the courtroom. "This court recognizes the rightful claim of Aisha as equal heir to her parents' property. Any attempt to disinherit her is hereby null and void." I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks, not of sorrow, but of victory. My parents slumped in their seats, their faces pale. Imran stormed out, muttering curses. Their plan, their greed, their betrayal, it had all collapsed. They had lost not just their scheme, but their reputation, their dignity, their power. That night, when I returned home, the silence was deafening. My father sat in his chair, staring blankly. My mother's eyes were swollen from crying. I looked at them, my heart heavy but resolute. You've lost me. I'm still your daughter, but you abandoned your duty as parents. You sold your love for money. Neither spoke. Neither could. For the first time, I walked into my room not as their obedient daughter, but as the woman who had survived their betrayal and turned it into their punishment. The daughter who once gave everything now stood as the rightful heir, her parents stripped of their schemes. Their betrayal had destroyed their own honor, while her courage became her revenge. The house felt different after the verdict. Not lighter, not happier, just emptier. For years, I had thought of it as my sanctuary, my home, the place where laughter echoed through the walls. But now, those walls carried a silence so heavy it pressed on my chest. My father no longer thundered through the rooms. My mother no longer paraded her pride before neighbors. Even Imran had vanished, leaving behind only his mocking laughter in my memories. They were still here, my parents, but in truth, they were gone. Their authority, their power, their masks, all stripped away. And me? For the first time, I wasn't the background character of this house. I wasn't the invisible daughter who gave without asking. I wasn't the weak link they could discard. I was Aisha. The rightful heir. The survivor of their betrayal. Days turned into weeks, but the atmosphere never healed. My father, once proud and commanding, barely spoke. Sometimes I'd find him staring out of the window, his face etched with lines of defeat. My mother tried to bridge the silence with forced smiles, but even she couldn't hide the shame. Neighbors who used to admire them now whispered behind their backs. The daughter won the case, they said. Her parents betrayed their own child for money. For a family that lived on respect and reputation, this was a death blow. And I knew, this was part of my revenge. Not just the inheritance, not just the legal victory, but this silence, this shame, this emptiness they had created for themselves. One evening, I found my mother sitting alone in the kitchen, her head resting on her hands. For the first time, she looked small, fragile, even. Aisha, she whispered when she noticed me. We made a mistake. Her voice broke, but I felt no sympathy. A mistake? No, Mother. A mistake happens when someone forgets. This wasn't a mistake. This was a choice. You didn't see me as a daughter. You saw me as a burden. Tears welled in her eyes. We placed money above you. Maybe we never realized how precious you truly were. For a fleeting second, I wanted to forgive her, I wanted to, but the wound was too deep. I was precious, Mother. But you lost me the moment you saw me as nothing more than an ATM machine. She sobbed silently, and I turned away. Some words cannot be unsaid. Some betrayals cannot be undone. If my mother broke with tears, my father broke with silence. He no longer shouted, no longer ordered. He moved like a shadow in the house, carrying the weight of his defeat. One night, as I passed his room, I heard him muttering in the dark. I pushed my own daughter away, my own blood, for money. For a man who had lived his whole life on pride, those words were the deepest punishment of all. But as they crumbled, I rebuilt. I took control of my finances fully, no more handing over paychecks, no more blind sacrifices. I invested in myself, pursued dreams I had long buried, and began building a future of my own making. And with each step, I realized something profound: revenge isn't just about destroying the betrayer. It's about reclaiming what they tried to take from you. My parents tried to take my identity, my worth, my right to belong. And by standing up, by fighting, I reclaimed it all. But the story didn't end in the courtroom. Relatives who once sided with my parents began reaching out to me privately. Aisha, forgive us. We didn't understand your pain. Some even confessed that they, too, had been wronged by greed in their families. My story became a quiet warning in our circle: betray your blood, and you'll pay the price. Even neighbors started treating me differently. Not as a weak daughter, but as a strong woman who dared to fight back. They stopped praising my parents and began whispering my name with respect. In a strange, twisted way, I had become the very thing my parents wanted for themselves: respected, recognized, powerful. One day, a letter arrived. It was from Imran. His words dripped with bitterness. "You destroyed everything. You turned our parents against their son. You'll live with this guilt forever." I read the letter twice, then laughed. Guilt? No. The only guilt belonged to him and to my parents. I folded the letter, burned it, and let the ashes scatter into the night sky. For once, I felt free. Weeks later, I sat across from my parents at the dining table. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Finally, I spoke. "I want you both to understand something. This case, this fight, it wasn't about destroying you. It was about taking back what was mine. You thought I was weak, but look at me now. I'm here, standing on my own." My father's eyes filled with tears. My mother lowered her gaze. "What's lost can never be recovered," I continued. "But remember this, a daughter's pain never fades. You betrayed me for money, and that betrayal has hollowed you out." The words hung in the air, final and irrevocable. And that was my real revenge. Not just the inheritance. Not just the victory in court. But the hollow silence that now lived in their hearts. The knowledge that their own greed had destroyed their honor, their peace, their family. They wanted to erase me. Instead, they erased themselves. And I rose stronger, sharper, untouchable. As I walked out of that house for the last time, suitcase in hand, I didn't look back. The past was buried there, in those walls, in their silence, in their shame. But the future? That belonged to me. Sometimes, revenge isn't about blood or violence. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is simply standing tall, making them watch as you live the life they tried to steal from you. And so I ask you, what would you do if the very people you trusted most decided your life wasn't worth your inheritance? Would you stay silent, or would you rise, like I did, and make your betrayal their downfall?